Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk OMMA. I'm your host and agency PIO, Portia Riley, and today I'm joined by Kenny Naylor, who serves as the Director of Consumer Protection Services at the State Department of Ag, Food, and Forestry. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, we work together and we know the medical marijuana industry directly impacts your agency. Can you talk about how that is?
It impacts us in several areas. Probably the largest area in my division is with the Weights and Measures program. We check all scales for accuracy and to make sure that they're appropriate for use as selling material across it. Obviously, when all these dispensaries and even in some cases growers came into be, we had to add that onto our list of things to do. In addition to that, pesticides is another area where we have run into a lot of things and in a lot of different ways. We've had people using pesticides on their crops, which is not legal to do. Only a few exceptions. We've had people who are using pesticide containers to water their marijuana crops, and that is not legal to do. We've had people who have water leaving their property as well, some of which contain pesticides in them, sometimes fertilizer, and that has also brought us into this. In addition to that, if you're selling live plants, we regulate the sale of live plants. Within the state, we have what they call red imported fire ant quarantine that runs along our southern third of the state. So they have to meet the requirements of that if you grow in that area and then you ship out. Other requirements with live plants, and so we check those to make sure they're meeting those. Finally, and probably our biggest thing that we regulate is seed. Anyone who's selling seed of any kind, included in this case marijuana, has to have a seed license with us. We have certain requirements for labeling, what product it is, what strain, when was it grown, what's the germination rate, those kind of things that they have to provide on a label. And finally, we do regulate who they can sell marijuana seed to. We restrict it to people who have a license, whether that's like a wholesaler, a grower kind of type person, or a person with a patient license. They're supposed to also, as a part of that, keep records just like they would under OMMA's requirements.
I want to touch on all of those things, but first I know you all sit down with us for these kind of roundtable talks with yourself, us, other state agencies to discuss some of the issues that you guys come into contact with. Talk about those conversations that you all have that lead to solutions and further the conversation in regard to us kind of tackling some of these issues together.
Well, initially, some of the things we talked about were things like seed, as an example, because it seemed to be something that wasn't completely covered under OMMA, and we had portions of it. We addressed that in our rules. Other things, we've sent them over information about the scales. Where do you go to look for a scale that's proper for selling material across? Labeling issues, there's a certain way you label if you're selling labeled products, those kind of things. Getting them in contact with Oklahoma State has a facility up there that helps people label their products properly for sale. Most recently it's been on those products that are actually kind of coming from hemp but being processed either into Delta 9 to be sold or Delta 8 or THCO, whatever it may be, for sale. And those products, at least some of them, are showing up at gas stations and other places, and just trying to decide, what do we do with that going forward.
Hemp is a very hot button topic right now when you hear about cannabis. What are some things that you want people to know, or what questions are you guys fielding in regard to hemp from a regulatory standpoint?
Well, always one of the biggest ones is the difference between hemp, which is what we regulate at ODAFF and is at least currently legal to sell across state lines, cannabis or medical marijuana. To some people, there's no distinction at all. It's all marijuana to them. For other people, they understand the differences and they don't want to grow, one or the other for specific reasons. We talk about it. Probably the biggest one is that hemp, actually, we charge probably more money for a license than you do, especially on larger grows. That's certainly true. They want to know why, why is this more expensive when the other one they would think would be more regulated. They also want to know about the requirements, because up until September, we didn't have the requirements for testing like you did under marijuana. And there's smokable hemp out there, there's CBD products and all the stuff that people are intaking that at least, up to that point weren't required to be tested for, pesticides and heavy metals and those things.
Do you all get those overlapping questions in regard to people being confused on whether to reach out to you all or to OMMA regarding cannabis?
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes even between us and OMMA, they ask questions that cross both lines. So, trying to figure out where to send them or to get enough clarity from them to know what they want to do. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it takes both of us to go do that. Another thing we've done collaboratively is some of these having so many problems, from a regulatory standpoint, we've went out and done joint inspections to check and see, are they applying pesticides? Are they following OMMA's rules and stuff? So we've done several of those as well.
Can you speak to the efficiency that that's led to being able to work collaboratively to address some of these issues that you guys are seeing and that we're seeing?
Well, I think it's always helpful. I mean, we've, with other agencies, DEQ as an example, have always kind of done things together when you're not quite sure of how or where something, breaks within your law and rules. Is this OMMA in this case or is this ODAFF? And if you have both of them there, you can address both at the same time. Another thing where that works and is really helpful is you have maybe the grower in this case might tell you, well, OMMA said this is okay, or, ODAFF doesn't have a problem with this. And when you're both sitting there, then you can get all that cleared up.
What are some things that you guys address in these conversations that you're still working to find solutions for? Is there anything from you all's perspective that you hope to tackle moving forward?
I would circle back around to the Delta 8 and those questions, because I think right now it's affecting both of us in the sense that there's a lot of these products out there. And we would like to make sure that, they're regulated, that they're clearly labeled and safe for the consumer.
Is there any education or resources that you can offer listeners in regard to Delta 8 and safety surrounding it? I know a lot of people have inquired about it, like to me, but it's like there's so many people in the public who don't have a clear picture of what Delta 8 actually is. They're just hearing Delta 8, and I feel like it's becoming like this buzzword.
Well, I would agree with you. It does seem like more people are becoming aware of it, but unfortunately we don't have, a lot of information out there on it, at least from an agency standpoint. Now, if you want to, do some research online, there's actually quite a bit of information out there. As soon as they kind of work on getting one of these, then they begin to produce another, whether that's, Delta 10 or whatever it is. So, though all of those are fairly similar.
While we're on education, I know you mentioned pesticides. We test for pesticides. I know you guys have a hand in kind of overseeing those kind of regulations. Is there any advice that you can offer or resources that you can offer to growers surrounding pesticides?
Yes, we do have a one-page informational sheet, a Q&A on our website, I believe, or at least it was on OMMA's website as well. And I would highly suggest they read that. And then if they still have questions, I would say, contact us. Speaking on pesticides and y'all analyzing them, our labs, OMMA's lab and then us, they submit to us the ones that they find positives, and we follow up on those and have actually found out quite a bit of information, including people doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. So that's been a good collaborative effort between the two of us.
Having a state agency liaison that goes out and speaks to all of our partner agencies, just discussing some of the things that we're seeing that you all are seeing. Talk about the efficiency in regard to the industry that provides.
I think it always helps when, all of us are on the same page. So they're not hearing, OMMA's telling them one thing, and then they come to ODAFF and they hear something a little different. And so I think any time that we can come together and give uniform information, that it helps the industry comply with the laws and regulations.
In your role as the Director of Consumer Protection Services, talk about what all that entails.
Well, for me, it's a lot of different programs. I mean, when you get outside of marijuana, medical marijuana, we do feed, seed, fertilizer. I talked about weights and measures. We do the scales, but we also do, price verification checks. So, whether that's a Walmart or a Dollar General or the convenience store or Kohl's or JCPenney's. We go into all those facilities to make sure their price is the same from the shelf to the register. We do what we call standard packs, which would be, whether it's a bag of chips or a bag of feed to make sure it meets the weight. We do random packs, which if you think about, you go buy a package of hamburger meat, we're going to make sure that weight that you're actually getting your meat, the weight is in the meat, not the meat in the container kind of thing. We do, like I said, live plants. We also do phytosanitary certificates. If you want to ship out of state a product, if you want to ship out of country a product, then we have to sign off on that so that they can send it with an official either state or federal document. We manage manage quarantine with invasive insects or diseases. We do pesticide related. We license all pesticide companies. We check up on them and make sure they're doing the records. We follow up on complaints. Like I said, a very wide range of things we do within my division. Would like to add there that we do also oversee with any kind of ag-related crop, but medical marijuana as well. When you build a new facility, our agency handles that. So that's another way where we've, kind of had some dealings with all the new, greenhouses and buildings and other things for medical marijuana facilities.
You all are very safety forward, as we are. Talk about the importance of that, especially in your role.
Depending on different things, obviously with pesticides, with our own staff, we check and make sure that check them for exposure at least once a year. One of the things that we do is nearly all pesticide labels have personal protective equipment requirements. So when we do an inspection, that's one of the things we check is to make sure, do you have this on hand? Are you using it if we catch you making an application? Those are some of the things. Not so much, necessarily in medical marijuana, but in other areas like fertilizer, anhydrous ammonia is a pressurized product that's caustic and other things that people deal with. Once again, we make sure you have your safety equipment on hand and that it actually works.
And I know we kind of touched on it, but Senate Bill 1737 that requires growers to register sensitive crops, you all play a role in that. Kind of explain it for people who don't know.
Yes, we've had a sensitive crop viewer for probably, at least 10 or 15 years. And as a part of that, any crop that might be sensitive to any herbicide or insecticide, they have the ability to place this on there so that, a applicator can look at it and see, do I want to apply this? What, wind direction or other thing might hold them. So we've obviously had a big uptick, but in the number of people who have applied and are being added to our site. However, the news, I guess, for you is that we have been developing a new pesticide-sensitive viewer, and we're very close to rolling it out. And I think it will be very nice. I think maybe a little more user-friendly.
From an internal standpoint at this point, but if I was on the outside looking in, I feel like just having this conversation, I've learned that you all do so much more than people may think. What's something from your perspective that people would be surprised to know that you guys do?
Well, I go back to like the phytosanitary certificates. Hemp came along, and if you want to ship, let's say, hemp seed to Thailand, then, we would have to do an inspection of that and ship it there. But the of phytosanitary certificates, the largest item in Oklahoma that we do them for is sesame seed. The second largest is mung beans, which I don't know, just for listeners, mung beans are what they make bean sprouts from. And then we kind of get into logs, walnut, pine, timber, and that kind of stuff. So those are things that probably Oklahoma isn't expected to be shipping, but that we do inspections for and write certificates for.
Wow, that's very interesting. What do those inspections consist of? Can you walk us through one?
A lot of them just kind of vary. So like if we're doing a seed inspection for something that would go through, we look for, do they have any noxious weeds in there? Do you see, plant diseases or foreign material or any of that kind of stuff? If all that looks clean and healthy, then, that would be considered a good inspection. When you get into other things, like let's say the logs, we may have to core them to pull a sample because they look for, like in pine, they look for nematodes. So that would be something we have to send off to a lab for them to review. Other things we do, like live plants, we talked about shipping them. Let's say you grew a marijuana plant in a quarantine area and you wanted to ship it out. We would be inspecting the growing media portion of it to see if there are ants there. Usually that's if it's grown outside. Now, if they grow it inside and they can seal it off, then we'll just be checking the building to make sure that it's excluding ants from getting in.
What happens if someone was to fail an inspection?
Depending on what type of inspection it was, just to kind of take you through the process, typically we give them an opportunity to correct. So let's say someone was making a pesticide application and they did it incorrectly. We would usually give them an opportunity to correct. If they didn't correct, or if it was something like they weren't wearing PPE, we would probably send them what we call a letter of warning, which is notifying them that they violated the law. Once you get a letter of warning from ODAFF, we usually send that on to our general counsel's office, and then they make a decision whether to fine or not to fine. In some cases, when we've had instances, like people using pesticide containers to water their marijuana plants or applying pesticides to their marijuana plants, we have fined them for doing that. They send out their what they call a notice of violation. People can either agree to it or, there's a process to go through if they would like to fight it. And then, eventually we agree and sign off and they either pay the fine or whatever the agreement is. So,
what do you hope that we can address to help you all, or you all can address to help us, just partnering together to make things more successful moving forward?
Well, I think the biggest thing from our standpoint, the whole Delta 8, whether it's THCO, any of the other cannabinoids, just dealing with that issue. As agencies, we meet regularly together in a meeting, and us and OBN and DQ. That's been good for trying to work this out. No, we haven't worked it out yet, and hopefully somewhere along the way we do, but those products need some type of regulation. They need their labeling clarified just so people know what they're getting and can understand.
When medical marijuana first passed in the state, what did you all do on your end to prepare for some of the things that you're currently facing?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know that we did necessarily a whole lot because to a lot of degrees we didn't know how much it was going to affect us. Kind of knew the scales, but had no idea. I mean, y'all had, I think, 8,000 licenses at one time or 12,000 total between the two. We do about 11 or 12,000 scales a year, so that was just added on to that, to try to cover. It's a little worse in the first year because we verify scales are working and accurate in the first year that they're set up, and then, we just randomly try to grab enough of them to make sure they're working. We also had to get a different set of check weights because the scales used for this are more accurate at lower weights. To do the best job we could, we had to make a purchase of those. As far as the pesticides, kind of expected, that there would be some issues. The other one that's been kind of weird that kind of hit both with hemp and marijuana, especially marijuana grown outside, was pollen. Cross-pollination between plants, because we have a lot referred to as feral hemp in Oklahoma. And then you had people growing hemp and people growing marijuana side by side, which is antagonistic to both in the cross-pollination situation. So that's not something, that we've dealt with, and I'm not really sure how you do that to work out for everybody, but certainly has been an issue. The deal with the sensitive crop viewer will be great because I think that's been one of the biggest problems is people just don't know, oh, wow, there's someone growing marijuana back here and I had no idea until I'm flying over the top of it. Having the ability to know they're there will help both.
For sure. And then just to change gears, tell me a little bit about yourself and the journey that led you here.
Well, that's a short story, but but no, I grew up on a farm, south Oklahoma City. Both my grandparents were dairy farmers. I went to OSU, and after going to OSU, I worked for a little bitty business called Archer Daniels Midland, which I think is either the first or second largest ag company in the world. Came back to Oklahoma, and then I came to work for the state in July 3rd of 2000. So I've been here 22 and a half years.
Wow.
And I've done a little bit. I've been in the CPS division the whole time. Within the CPS division, I've done fertilizer, feed, pesticides. I did a little bit with the nursery program and our insect trapping, environmental for a while, and then now division director. And I've been division director for 7 years. So it's been quite a long while. Now I live out east of Oklahoma City now, and I have a small, probably hobby farm might be the better word. I've got pretty much a little bit of everything. I got goats, turkeys, chickens, a rabbit, and a couple of dogs and a cat. I will say this, considering how high eggs are, I'm very proud of my girls. I had a talk with them the other day and told them they need to step up their game, and they have done so.
I was at the store the other day, and I saw a package of eggs for $8.59.
Yeah.
What inflation? If anybody in the positions that need to hear this are listening, please help us. Well, your journey from being young on a farm to where you're at now kind of ties full circle. How does that feel when you take a step back and kind of look at your life like that?
I've always loved agriculture. This is a fun end. I enjoy my job. It's interesting. I can say within our division, things never get boring. There's always something going on. That part keeps you, like I said, just excited and interesting. I know y'all did not get a lot of time to stand up your medical marijuana program. We got an equal amount of time to stand up the hemp program. It passed in May of, maybe it was April of 2018, which is just a little bit before you guys. And we stood it up within a month to be used. So not as large, admittedly, but, it was still a big task undertaking. So
I bet that built a lot of understanding in regard to kind of working together to combat some of the things that we're saying.
Oh, absolutely. And, we've done a good job of working together. And that's the one thing I always appreciate. I think we're very good at working with each other.
I agree. And then lastly, this is the hardest question of all. I ask every single person that comes on this podcast this very question. What is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Wow. It used to be weightlifting, but now I would say it's just doing things around the farm. I mean, whether that's going fishing or taking care of the animals, or unfortunately, mostly it's been remodeling lately. So not by choice. So
I love that. I love weightlifting also. My sister's like a cardio queen, and I'm like, I just want to lift. So I love when people are like, I love weightlifting, because they never say that when they're talking about working out. It's either like, I like to go to the gym or I like to run. I'm like, can we just say weightlifting, its own category? Is there anything that you'd like to ask that I didn't ask or touch on?
I don't think I have anything extra.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Appreciate the opportunity and have enjoyed it.
And thank you to the listeners for tuning in to another episode of Let's Talk OMMA.